Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about the latest report on the state of India's forests and why it is often criticized. We also talk about Vodafone Idea offering more than 35% of its equity to the government. But first, we talk about the Uttar Pradesh state elections, which are scheduled to take place from next month. The party currently in power in the state with Yogi Adityanath as the chief minister is the BJP. And last week, it faced a major setback. This is because 10 legislators, including 3 ministers from the party, resigned and joined the Samajwadi Party, which is the main opposition in the state. In this segment, Indian Express's Maulshree Seth, who reports on UP politics for the paper, joins us to talk about why these legislators resigned and how concerned the BJP is about this development. Maulshree, these legislators leaving the BJP and joining the SP has been a big news when it comes to the UP elections. What is the reasons that these ministers left the party and who are some of the prominent names among them?
Some of the party leaders, including MLAs and the sitting ministers, have left BJP in the recent past. In understanding this, we have to understand that UP is an assembly of 403 seats, and out of that, BJP had won over 300 seats in the previous elections. So there was a realization in BJP as well as among leaders that there is a section of MLAs who would not be repeated this time to fight the anti-incumbency. But what people did not expect was that some of the sitting ministers who have been given power in the government for past 5 years, so they'll also exit from the party just before the polls. And the names were Swami Prasad Maurya, Dhan Singh Saini and Dara Singh Chauhan, all OBC leaders. So OBCs were one section which had come out and voted for BJP in 2017, and it contributed to their larger majority in the state. So the trend started and is specifically pinpointing to these OBC leaders shifting to SP, which has affected BJP and created kind of a dent as far as their OBC appeasement is concerned.
And what is the reason these leaders have cited for leaving the party?
See, it's very interesting. All the 3 leaders, specifically the first 2 almost reacted in the similar manner. And even their lines were also the similar. They said that for past 4.5 years, they felt that we Dalits, backwards, farmers, unemployed, small traders, their needs were neglected in the present government. So all these leaders have left the party saying that this was neglected, this particular section which was deprived, Dalits, OBCs. But the other side of the question has been that why didn't they raise this issue for 4.5 years when they were in the government? Like Swami Prasad Maurya has said that he tried to do his best despite working in an ideology which he felt was opposite to of what he felt. This has largely been the reason which officially these leaders have cited while leaving the party.
And with their exit, how concerned is the BJP right now, going ahead?
Even though BJP has said that they are not much affected by such leaders who would leave the party just because there are chances that they'll be denied a ticket or their close ones might be denied ticket. But the fact remains that this trend of OBC leaders leaving the party has certainly affected the party and they are re-preparing their strategies accordingly. So even though party has come out in open saying that it won't affect them much, but it does affect them in their planning at the grassroots level.
Right. And also, how much advantage will it give the Samajwadi Party? And how has its party chief, Akhilesh Yadav, reacted to it?
See, Samajwadi Party, everybody knows that their traditional vote bank has been MY, Muslim Yadav combination. And what SP is trying to do is, while taking out OBC leaders from BJP and bringing it to its fold, they say it's not just the Yadav, but other OBCs also that they'll be catering to. It is why Swami Prasad Maurya, when he joined, he said that the fight, like BJP Chief Minister Adityanath is saying that 80-20, it's going to be 85-15. So saying that the OBC and everybody would come together on one particular platform while there'll be a certain section which will be left out. So SP is hoping that along with this, just the Yadav Muslim combination, they'll be able to consolidate larger OBC section also with them by showing a trend that the OBC leaders are wanting to join SP and they are not satisfied, or they felt that the due respect was not given to them when the BJP was in power, and promising that the OBCs and others would be given their due respect and place if SP government comes to power in the state. So as far as showing that is concerned, just before the poll, so SP has kind of gained ground on that.
Okay, so considering all this, what is the BJP's campaign focusing on right now?
See, BJP's campaign is largely on two things as it appears: combining the development agenda with that of the Hindutva. Even like recently, if we quote just one of the recent videos, since it's going to be largely on the digital platform this time. So, one of the recent videos that the party's campaign has released, where we can see their MP Ravi Kishan singing a Bhojpuri song to tell about the achievements of the government.
योगी के सरकार बा विकास के बहार बा सड़कन के जाल बा काम बेमिसाल बा जे कबो न रहल ऊ अब्बा यूपी में सब बा.
So they are making it a point to mention that how not just the construction of Ram temple has started, they are specifically pointing out that how due respect is given to the faith, one particular faith in this particular government, that they are saying that respect to the institutions like Ram temple have been given due respect during the present government, and even the other religious places. So party is trying to combine the development plan with that of the Hindutva. So both they are taking side by side as of now.
And what has been the response of the Samajwadi Party to this, and how strong a contender does it appear to be for the upcoming polls?
There's no doubt that as of now, SP has emerged as main opponent of BJP in UP. And they are confident with that, as I said, that the traditional vote bank, Muslim Yadav combination, along with the OBCs, and they're trying to consolidate other people, saying that it is during their regime they were not given that due importance. So SP's campaign is also based on that. And at the same time, they're also reminding people of the work that Akhilesh had done and the schemes that Akhilesh had launched during his government in the past, specifically like laptop distribution, Kanya Vidyadan for the girls, and a pension for widow women, Samajwadi pension. So they are reminding the public about those schemes, the beneficiaries, and the welfare schemes that they had launched during their time. So they are kind of combining their campaign to that.
And Maulshree, the other thing that has happened is that we have seen the BJP release its first list of candidates, which involves Western UP. And the party has denied tickets to some 20 sitting MLAs, and it has also brought in new faces. What has been the reasoning behind that?
See, most of the sitting MLAs who have been denied, it's because of the anti-incumbency. The local equations and party felt that if their names are repeated, they would not be able to take out their seat in this poll. So it's largely anti-incumbency on those seats is seen as the reason for denying them the party tickets.
And also from this first list of candidates, we now understand that CM Yogi Adityanath would be contesting from Gorakhpur. Now, earlier talks were rife that he would be contesting from Ayodhya. The understanding was that this would amplify the Hindutva message. So, what is the reason that he is now contesting from Gorakhpur?
If we see the recent few elections, it's very rare for a chief minister to contest a poll. Reason being that when chief minister would be confined to a one particular constituency, and otherwise when he'll be expected to campaign all across the state to talk about what he has done and the achievements of his government. But considering it's a COVID time period and the public meetings and the legwork is going to be lesser and it's more of a digital campaign. So while Yogi would be there from Gorakhpur, the fact remains that Gorakhpur being his hometown is a very safe seat for him. So what people are expecting that it is one particular seat where he would not have to do much legwork or hard work to clear that seat. So that is how it is being seen. So as of now, since party has decided to field him from Gorakhpur, so it's considered as one of the safe seats that could have been for him rather than Ayodhya.
Also, we have now seen the Bahujan Samaj Party come out with their list of candidates. BSP, of course, is another major party in the state. What stands out in their list of candidates?
BSP has released a list of about 53 candidates, and majority of them they have not repeated. And another fact is to see out of these 53, 14 are Muslim candidates. And while Samajwadi Party is making a claim to consolidate minority votes towards its votes, BSP chief Mayawati has targeted SP and said that it is BSP which has actually given them the leadership opportunity while giving out larger number of tickets to Muslims. So that is what BSP chief Mayawati has said while she was releasing the party list recently.
And the other thing that we saw recently was Mayawati react to a statement made by Swami Prasad Maurya. Maurya had said that SP will bring together Samajwadis and Ambedkarwadis. Could you talk about what Mayawati's response to that was?
Maurya did say that now these Samajwadis and Ambedkarites would come together on a same platform with SP. While Mayawati has pointed out that how it was during SP regime in the past when they went out to change the names of the institutions named after SC leaders like Kanshi Ram. So she has pointed out that when the SP was in power, whatever the steps that the party took, it was clear that they were not very SC friendly. In fact, it was anti-Dalit. So what Mayawati has said. So she has made it clear that this is one factor which cannot go along together. And if we see the background, her statement also comes out that BSP and SP had tried to become an alliance partner in the past and it didn't work out despite the fact that both Akhilesh and Mayawati had openly come out and said that they'd set aside all their differences. But we had seen that when both the parties had come together to form an alliance, they could not bring together the party workers at the grassroots level. So the base vote of both the parties did not come out in support of each other's candidate. And specifically, BSP was at harm, and because they ended up losing their vote base also, apart from the number of seats. So whatever Mayawati has said, it does come out from that background also.
And next, we talk about the state of Indian forests. Last week, the Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change released what is called the India State of Forest Report 2021. This report is published every 2 years, and it is an assessment of India's forest and tree cover. In this year's report, one of the major highlights is that India's forest cover has increased in the past 2 years. Now, this appears to be good news, but many experts have raised concerns about it because they don't really believe that India's forest cover has actually increased. To discuss why that is the case and what the report highlights, Indian Express's Esha Roy joins us. Esha, one of the main highlights of this year's report is that India's forest cover seems to have increased in the past 2 years. So how much has it increased and what kind of forests have seen an increase in their cover?
Right. So the ICFR 2021, that's the forest survey, they found that the forest cover in India has increased by 1,540 square kilometers in the past 2 years. This means that when the previous survey was released in 2019, the forest cover was 21.67% of the total geographical area of the country, and that has gone up now to 21.71%. They've also found that the tree cover, which is different from forested areas, has increased by 721 square kilometers. This, on one hand, is good news that there has been an increase in the number of trees as well as forested areas in the country. But on the other hand, this can be quite deceptive because the forest cover actually is delineated in three categories. The first is very dense forest, which has a canopy density of more than 70%. Then moderately dense forest, which has a canopy density of 40 to 70%. And then lastly is the open forest, which has a canopy density of less than 40%. Now, the reason why it's important to know this is because the forest cover has actually grown in the very dense category as well as the open forest category. whereas the moderately forest category has actually declined. And what experts say is that the very dense category forests are actually the protected forests, such as national parks and sanctuaries. So while this is good, but the fact that the moderately dense forests, which are considered natural forests, have declined, and simultaneously open forests, which have less density than moderately dense forests, have increased, indicates that natural forests are degrading and converting into open forests. So while there has been an increase, it can be a little deceptive. It could mean that certain forested areas are degrading.
And according to the report, the forest cover in states like Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, and Odisha have increased, but it specifically points out that there are 5 states in the northeast which have shown a loss of forest cover. So, what is the reason cited for the loss there?
So, alarmingly, although the decrease has really not been very high in terms of forest cover, but nevertheless, the forest cover in 5 northeastern states, which is Arunachal Pradesh, Mizoram, Meghalaya, Nagaland, Manipur, shown a decrease in forest cover, which is worrying because the Northeast really is our carbon sink basin, and one of the most forested areas in the country, really is the country's green lungs, so as to speak. So while the Northeast states, all 7 states combined, account for only 7.98% of the total geographical area of the country, they account for 23.75% of the total forest cover. And this has shown a decline of 1,020 square kilometers, all states combined. And this is also concerning because the Northeast forested areas are very rich in the biodiversity, and their repository of our flora and fauna is unique to the area, and you don't find in other parts of the country. Now, what the report has found is that one of the main reasons for the decline in forest cover in the Northeast has been the natural calamities which have taken place increasing in frequency over the last couple of years, such as the landslides, the avalanches, the increased flooding of the area that has been majorly contributing to the loss, as well as traditional reasons such as dhoom cultivation or shifting agriculture, which is typical of this region. That's one of the contributing factors, as well as other human activities such as increasing development have also contributed to the loss.
Okay, so right now we discussed a couple of things. One is that while the forest cover of protected forests has gone up, the cover of natural forests has gone down. And the other thing is that the forest cover in these 5 northeastern states has also gone down because of disasters, agriculture, and human development. What are some of the other things that the report highlights this year?
Right. So, apart from, overall, the report has shown marginal increases in a lot of areas. For instance, mangroves have increased, but marginally. In the country, there's a 17 square kilometer increase in mangroves, and the total area now stands at just under 5,000 square kilometers. But considering how important mangroves are for preservation of coastal areas and protection of coastal towns from cyclones and typhoons, there's a lot more needs to be done in increasing mangrove area and its conservation. The total carbon stock in country's forests is estimated at 7,204 million tons. And according to the report, there has been an increase of 79.4 million tons of carbon stock in the past 2 years. There's been a huge jump in bamboo forests as well, from nearly 14,000 million kulms in 2019 to 53,336 million kulms in 2021. And the one alarming finding has been that over 35% of forest cover in India is prone to forest fires, and temperatures have also been rising, like in the rest of the country, in forest areas as well. And out of this 35%, about 2.1% of forests in India are extremely prone to forest fires. So the Environment Ministry has also said that they're keeping a close watch on all the fire-prone areas and monitoring it practically 24/7 to ensure that we don't have further loss of forest through fires.
And Isha, over the years, this report has been criticized by experts. Like many experts, even with this year's report, they don't actually believe that the forest cover in India has actually increased. So, what is the reason behind their concerns?
Yes, that's actually very true. Well, the way the Forest Survey of India carries out the assessment is by doing wall to wall mapping of forests. And one of the major criticisms of the survey, while experts do concede to the fact that it is a robust assessment and very few countries in the world carry it out as regularly as India does. But one of the main criticisms of the assessment has been that when the survey is carried out, it's not just forested areas that are taken into account, that are included in the category of forest, but all kinds of plantation, especially when it comes to orchards or coconut tree plantations, for instance, or mango orchards or fruit orchards, which is very different from a natural forest. For instance, 1 hectare of natural forest will have hundreds of species of trees, of plants, of grasses, insects, and animals, whereas 1 hectare of a mango orchard, for instance, will only have one species of tree, which is the mango tree. And it will have insects and birds, but the numbers will be limited and it won't be rich in biodiversity. So when you include categories like plantations, and critics say that sometimes even parks in urban areas are included as India's forest cover, they say it's quite misleading because these are not forested areas. And forests contribute to not just forming carbon sinks for the country, but they contribute in fighting climate change. They're environmentally extremely important for human beings as well as the wildlife in the country. So, in a fruit orchard, for instance, you'll find wildlife very rarely, whereas the same area in a forest will find wildlife. So, these are some major differences, and that's the reasons why the critics denounce the report so much.
And in the end, we talk about the telecom giant Vodafone Idea. For some time now, Vodafone Idea has owed a lot of money to the government, a total of 1.78 lakh crore. This money is for the adjusted gross revenue and spectrum dues that most telecom companies owe to the government for using spectrum, the radio waves through which telephone signals are carried out. In the past, the company has tried to raise money and look for investors in an effort to pay this money to the government. But that hasn't worked out for it. So last week, the company decided that in order to pay this money, it will offer 35.8% of its equity to the government. In this segment, Indian Express's Aashish Aryan, who reports on the telecom sector, explains how this decision came about.
So when the Union Cabinet had in September last year approved a telephone reforms package, which was aimed at elevating the pain of the sector in the near term. So one of the major reforms that was there was that the telecom companies could choose to pay the AGR dues and deferred spectrum dues after 4 years instead of paying it immediately. In a sense, it was a major breather for companies like Vodafone Idea, which are reeling under debt of close to 2 lakh crore rupees.
Ashish says that once those huge sums of payments were deferred, the company then had the option to use the money they had to invest in better technology or to expand their networks. Most telecom companies took this option to delay the payment by 4 years. But with this option came a condition. This condition was that they would have to pay interest on that amount. Ashish says that this was done to protect the net present value of the dues, especially considering that this is public money. But what would happen if the companies were not able to pay that interest? Well, the government gave an option for that as well. Ashish tells us.
So if you are unable to pay the interest after 4 years, or if you decide right now also that you are unable to pay the interest, you could give the government equity in lieu of that interest. So it was an interest to equity scheme that whatever be the interest is calculated during the 4-year term, calculate it, and if you think that you do not want to pay it, so give us equity in lieu of that interest, and the government would hold basically that equity in that private company. So in a nutshell, this is the scheme, that we are giving you a chance to defer your spectrum payments and AGR payments by 4 years, but to protect the net present value of this money, we will levy interest on it. If you think you cannot pay the interest on the deferred payments, which has been deferred by 4 years, you give us equity in lieu of that.
And so this is the option that Vodafone Idea has now chosen and offered the government 35.8% of its equity. This is a big deal because this would mean that after the completion of the deal, the government will become its single largest stakeholder. But does that mean that Vodafone Idea will now become a government-run company? Ashish says that the short answer is no.
So it will not be a government company. That has been clarified by the government as well as Vodafone Idea. So we already know that the government will become the single largest stakeholder with 35.8%. And the current promoters, which is Vodafone Group and the Aditya Birla Group, their holdings will reduce to 28.5 and 17.8% respectively. But this does not mean that the government will install someone on the board or they'll have their chief executive sitting and taking decisions. Because two things have happened. First is that the current promoters have agreed to amend the shareholder agreement, and they have brought down the minimum qualifying shareholding threshold from 21% to 13%. This means that both Vodafone Idea, they'll continue to hold the rights to make important decisions about Vodafone Idea, such as maybe the appointment of directors and other key officials, among other things. And the government has said that we do not want to appoint anyone on your board. You run it as a private company. At the end of 4 years, or it gives the government the option at least to sell the stake that it has. But it is more often than not seen that the government holds on to the stake that it has purchased. And then when it needs money, so to say, to invest in various things or various other schemes, and if the company is doing well, it is that when the government sells these stake. Third possibility, which many analysts believe, is that since the government does not want to get into the telecom business, it is already in the telecom business with BSNL, MTNL and BBNL. What it will do is that it will sell a majority of this 35.8% stake to a third investor which expresses interest in buying this amount at a rate which will give the government profit but also help a 3-player telecom market survive in the country.
Ashish says that the jury is still out on whether this decision will help the company in the long term. But in the short term, there could be some advantages. And that is because the government now has a stake in the company.
So when Vodafone Idea now goes out to the international market or even domestic investors to seek money, they can present cleaner books which are not debt-ridden and the balance sheet which is not as stressed. That is one fact. The second fact is that the government is now the single largest shareholder in the company. So when you go to an investor and say that, the government itself is a single largest shareholder in our company, it enhances your chances of raising funds from global investors, since they also know that the government would not take any knee-jerk reaction which would hurt its own share prices or stake in the company itself. That said, analysts also believe that the company will have to look for avenues to increase its average revenue per user, which is ARPU, from the current 107-109 rupees to somewhere in the vicinity of 300 rupees to be able to sustain in the long run. I mean, these measures from the government could help it alleviate pain or avoid payments in the short run. But to survive as a company in the long run, which is maybe a decade or 2 decades from now, most analysts say that the key question, remains on the company's ability to raise equity in the near term and meet cash flow needs over the next 2-3 years.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.